understand we have to do this in English, and it's a pleasure to talk about some of the work that we have been doing here in Italy as an example of things that I see as general trends. I think Marco has asked me to maybe to make my life easier to talk a little bit about the journey of ActionAid as an example, but I would not indulge, I hope, in just talking about my organization or my journey, even though then we can have a discussion about how it is an example of trends. I would like to start, therefore, to actually with a few questions, and you can answer loudly or you can answer in your own, in your own mind. And I was wondering even before coming here, what is actually driving me here? Because I think you can be looking for a job opportunity, you can, and that's legitimate. You can try and be part of a movement. You can try and develop skills, motivation, even just understanding of where the world is going, specific knowledge about a specific theme. But in reality, in my opinion, you probably have to wonder whether you want to develop skills or you want to transform society, or you want to develop skills to transform society. So your motivation also, in my opinion, needs to maybe initially separate and reflect on what is actually needed in our society and what might actually please your ego, if you want. And the two things might even coincide. You can be very fulfilled in your professional career, but not necessarily one thing goes with the other. So learning to design and roll out complex operations is something that is necessary to run a non-governmental organization or any not-for-profit organization, but in my opinion, it's not enough. So I would start by challenging you on the idea that non-profit management is enough to actually transform society. In practice, there are many organizations, I want to go back to that later, there are many organizations that are part of civil society that have morphed or transformed themselves into spin-off, if you want, of state or corporate power, and that have given up their willingness, I would say, and even ability to actually transform society. So, if you are here for skills, that's legitimate. I assume that you will get those skills. But my question to you is whether you have a vision for society or not. Whether you are trying to get information to develop your own vision for future society, because you just don't have a vision, and then you have to be very clear about where you want to go if you want to move in the right direction. And I think, therefore, even if you are being taught skills about management, what is important for initial reflections is really whether there is a vision for society that you can share. If you don't have that, you will run round in circles in many ways, because you will continue to implement policies designed by somebody else, and you might risk producing a lot of output without producing any outcome. So reflect on that. Thank you. much. Reflect on that throughout the course, I would say, and throughout your journey, even after the course. And keep focus about the vision you have for society. I'm saying all of this because, in a way, the work of civil society organization, in my opinion, cannot but be about power transfer. Power is, in the 70s and 80s, we had lots of talks about power. But in both personal relations, relations between states and communities, always power is transacted. That is a basic understanding that I think should inform your future development. There is a power that is transacted when a woman fights for her rights in the relationship with the husband or partner in the private sphere. There is power that is transacted between this developed country and a rich country, and there is power that is transacted when citizens demand for accountability on how public money is spent on their communities. So power and its transaction is at the center of any civic action and at the center of social change, I think. We cannot produce a social change without having a vision for what we want and without recognizing that I can have all the skills in the world to put a fantastic project together, but if that project doesn't transform and doesn't transfer power from A to B, then it's only, it will produce good output maybe, but it will not produce a real outcome in terms of change. Yeah? So what is the problem of the world? I'm sorry to start as big as this, but what is the problem? The problem of the world, in my opinion, and when I say my opinion, I will underline later that this is a thinking that has developed in the development sector over the years, and that ActionAid has somehow contributed to lead. So the problem is that there is a growing issue with distribution or pre-distribution of power. Some of you might have seen what Branko Milanovic called the elephant in the room. I don't know if you have ever seen this graph where basically through the analysis of data of who was getting better off and worse off between 1988 and 2008, Branko Milanovic articulated, we can go to that later, but has articulated that, of course, in society, in the world, there are winners and losers. And in the past 20 years or so, the winners are the super rich, the winners are the poor that got out of poverty in developing countries, and the losers are basically the middle class in what used to be the rich countries. So in a way, that has changed the understanding of, and this graph has the shape of an elephant, so it's called the elephant in the room, not just playing with the language, but basically if you look at the increase of real income and the percentile of population that is affected by that growth or decrease of income, then you get that shape like the silhouette of an elephant. But Milanovic, like many, was looking at growing economic inequality. So, and was articulating, like many have done in the past few years, that inequality is now cutting across societies vertically rather than separating rich states from poor states. But he was looking at growing economic inequality related to income. They say the richest are getting income that is impressive, the poorest are getting a reasonable income in poor countries. You have 2 to 400 million people growing out of poverty in China, to just give an example. And the middle class in the West are the losers. But that was only focusing on income. But there are other dimensions of inequality. Inequality now it's clear relates to the wealth of your family. For example, you can make more money if you're already born in a context where your family or your community is richer. It's about access to credit, access to welfare, access to knowledge, access to energy, access to technology, education, and of course access to food and water. So inequality and the pre-distribution of all of those resources, including knowledge, by the way, and the ability of the duty bearers, the state, basically, and the community of states to redistribute that power is the issue that, in a way, we have to take in mind if we want to transform society, if we want to be actors of social change. And all the technology, social technology that we might want to use has to contribute addressing those issues. If you don't want to change the current state of inequality, then one would wonder why you are in any social business. And what is it, therefore, that this fight for more equality and redistribution and rights is all about? In my opinion, and this is like Action Aid jargon, if you want, it's becoming our mantra. If you want to oversimplify these things or reunite the work that we might be doing under a baobab tree in India and the work that we do in L'Aquila to demand accountability for how resources are allocated for post-emergency reconstruction. If you want to reconcile all of those things, you might end up describing all that by saying that we are working for to improve or to recover some quality of our democracy. Democracy is the power of the people to actually discuss first and decide about their future. So we have moved as an organization, and some others have done the same, from an understanding of development that was prevalent in the 60s and 70s, where we would be de facto service providers. We were, as NGOs, in fact, I would say byproduct of Western liberal democracies that were replicating in developing countries the domination of the West, what we call the West now, over colonial countries that were former colonies, basically. We were just trying to be good, we were trying to transform society, but now, over the period of 30-40 years, of course, civil society organizations that just started to help out a few children in Ethiopia or India have realized that because with the resources that they can gather, they can only, do marginal work, maybe exemplary work, but they cannot address the root causes of that unequal redistribution of resources and power. The very concept of development had to morph, and that understanding that there is not much. I mean, we can help. Action Aid runs around 2,000 projects across the world, but it's a tiny drop in the ocean of social inequality and injustice that we try to address. So we have moved, as I said, and it's just an example of what other organizations have done. We have moved from being functional, as I said, to the continuation of post-colonial domination, if you want. Just accepting then to be part of a system that existed. And we have moved from a situation where people and organizations coming from the West were using an understanding of their role where that is also replicated by individuals now that are particularly rich. So we had rich countries, and now we have rich people that say, well, I deserve, I worked a lot, I have, with my wealth, I enable people to, have jobs and develop industries, and we are sort of running responsible, even in that good case, responsible for further development of other people and other jobs. It's the same understanding Western nations had then, maybe some of them still now. And then they were doing charity. Yeah? They were saying, many wealthy individuals, they were saying, okay, we are better off than other people, then we do charity and we'll help, we'll drop a little money here and there, because we want to give back to society. This is a very American understanding of relationships within a society. Over time, though, we as other NGOs realized that the technical efforts that we were doing to fix a problem here and there wouldn't transform society at all. We started to support the state, the duty bearer, rather than substitute for it. That was an initial development. We were saying together with others, well, there are rights holders, there are duty bearers. The duty bearer is the state in its various forms, it's national, but also regional and local representation. We would achieve more if we support the state and create alternatives for the state to implement, but there's no way any single organization or a congregation of private organization can do the job of the duty bearer, that is the state. So that was the first step. Then we started to advocate vis-a-vis the duty bearer. By experience, we were designing solutions, and we were saying, okay, not only we want to support you, but we want you to do A, B, C, D, because this is what will work. And we were starting to mobilize people in a different ways, working more on software rather than hardware, I would say, of society. But at the same time, this understanding of the role of civil society was morphing. Of course, the society itself was also changing. Poorer nations were starting to grow pockets of wealth, and richer countries were starting to develop very large pockets of exclusion and poverty and disenfranchisement and all that. So the NGOs that used to be functional, as I said, to the existing work, had also developed in a wrong way, I might say, because they had developed with an internal division of labor that were continuing to replicate. Basically, we would raise resources in the west or in the north, and we would transfer those resources for project implementation in the south. And then we were starting to do a little bit of advocacy on northern governments because we thought the power was there and they would take the responsibility to help out graciously the poorer nations. So we did have, as a community of NGOs, this very odd division of labor, even within organizations. We started to be self-critical about ourselves because, of course, governments of southern countries have become very powerful. The government of India or China, can ridicule the government of Italy, I would say, or the situation in which a government like Greece has been put in the past few years by economic power would never be possible in a country like China, for example. So the world was changing, and that division of labor within NGOs has also started to morph. In some organizations more than others, I would say. And I think we are at the beginning of this. Certainly, I was saying I wouldn't say much about ActionAid, but ActionAid was one of the organizations that I think was recognizing before than others the fact that that division of labor was anachronistic. So in the late 90s and early 2000s, we had done away with any expatriates in other countries. We have reorganized as a federation where only local staff would run the programs in each one of the countries. So we have Italians in Italy and we have Kenyans in Kenya. And the next step was that not only staff was starting to change in that way, but also the governance of the organization started to morph in that way. So we're now a federation where we sit in an assembly where the chairperson of the board of ActionAid India has one vote as the chairperson of the board of ActionAid UK. So the division of labor started to be challenged, and that was at the same time the cause of a reflection and the development that was witnessing how we were trying to adapt to a changing world. Because I think in the year 2000s, a divergence started even in NGO work. Some organizations decided that because they wanted to transform society, they needed to be rooted, they needed to have a social base in each one of the countries, they needed to link with movements, they needed to understand themselves as civic actors. Some other organizations decided that no, they didn't really want to change society, they just wanted to remain functional to continue, articulate, perpetrate, implement the policies that are prevailing. I would say, if you want to use a language that might be challenging, replicating the existing, system where capital counts more than people, just to be very clear. So some of the NGOs have started to grow, not in terms of their representative, their ability to represent quest for justice in society, but just going, and this is I'm underlining to you that are taking this course, just going with the way companies would go, providing services, even in the social sphere, that can be paid by government or institutions, but have no particular ambition to change society. And I think this is the reflection that is always central to whoever wants to start engaging in this work. Probably we are at a point where there is a choice to be made. Do we want, and this is why I started with vision of society, do we want to be part of this work, to produce civic engagement, participation, with patience of articulating, in Amartya sense, elements of dialogue, where he was saying a few years back, dialogue is the basis for producing society decisions that are useful for society rather than useful for a smaller part of society that is hegemonic. Dialogue needs to be informed, reasonable, heated if needed, and open. So, do we engage with developing the software of society, or do we skillfully and correctly engage in delivering projects that do not change the society as it is. We, for sure, have decided to be part of the first grouping of organization. So, I don't know, we are one organization that thinks that ability of a community to demand accountability on where public resources are spent is much more essential than the provision of brick and mortars to rebuild whatever has been destroyed by a natural disaster. And this is again why I think we keep talking about changing the software of society rather than the hardware of society. In a word, I think we are probably one of few organizations that has developed an ability and willingness, the two things that do not necessarily go together, to say that working on rights, redistribution of resources and knowledge, and the resilience of community, that means working on the quality of democracy, equals to recognizing that we are in politics. Yeah? Politics is what really interests society. And you cannot give for granted that that's a transformation that is easy, because for many, many years, the not-for-profit sector tried to stay out of politics, like if politics was only the politics of party representation that was taking people to the ballots every few years. But that, in our understanding, is a way of counting people rather than making people count. If you want to make people count, you have, again, to recognize that anything in social change is politics. And I'm coming to a conclusion for this reflection. Maybe bringing the reflection just a little bit to Italy, and in a way that might be understanding to others as well. In this country, we have had two traditions, if you want. The tradition of engagement that was linked to the presence of Catholic Church, and the tradition that was linked to the fact that we had the largest communist party in Western Europe. Those two traditions for many years were influencing one another, were fighting one another, but were building an understanding in society that you cannot transform society without politics. So, in one way, probably in the 90s, in the past 20 years, what has been prevailing is an understanding of social transformation that we started to believe that there are only technocratic solutions to problems. In my understanding, and the connection and understanding, of course, and the understanding of those organizations that have decided to understand themselves as civic actors, not just as implementers, is that no, you cannot just leave it to technological or technocratic solutions. When you engage in this work, some of you are already, you can be bureaucrats, but if you want to transform society, you have to be activists. You can be both, and sometimes you need to be both. But I think that reflection should always be present in your mind, and should inform the choice that you will make when, having acquired the skills, you will have to decide how to use those skills. So, yeah, all the best for these courses that you're undertaking. Remember that it's not just about knowledge, but it's about